Hi there, Mrs. Chiappe's class. It's me, Mrs. Chiappe, here in my office in El Dorado Hills in my house, and we are going to be doing our weekly lesson for America the Beautiful. Oh, I wish I could see your faces, but I'm happy to be able to at least kind of connect with you guys this way. So if your parents had looked at the syllabus, we know that today's lesson is all on Abraham Lincoln. Throughout this class, America the Beautiful, we've been talking about places and people and symbols and things that make America special. And we talked about we talked about George Washington, the first president, and that he was unique and special. And today we're going to be talking about Abraham Lincoln. Last week was Martin Luther King Jr. So it's fun for me to be able to share with you guys about these important Americans. Now, you're probably thinking, Mrs. Chiappe, I already know about Abraham Lincoln. Yeah, but there's more to learn and there's more stuff that you might not have known. So I'm going to give you some fun facts. But before I do that, you guys, are you ready for this? I'm going to take you around my little office because in my office, I actually have an entire, if I can get to it, bookshelf right there, all about Abraham Lincoln. And I like this bookshelf a lot. The reason if I can get good at showing you the picture, the reason I really like this and I wanted to show it to you is because it has some special things on it. It has this guy right here. Can you see him? This was made by one of our FLA students who's now an 8th grader. He made that for me back in 4th grade, so that's very special to me. This came from Abraham Lincoln's Memorial in Washington, D.C. One of my students visited that and brought that back for me, so that's super special. And on here I have, can you guys see him there? I want you to see it because it's pretty special too. I have a whole bookend that's Abraham Lincoln. So lots of stuff that I have in my office is Abraham Lincoln. In fact, you guys ready for this? On my wall, I'm going to walk to the other side of my office now. Ready? On my wall up there, well, that's George Washington. There's Abraham Lincoln. So what else can I show you in my office that's Abraham Lincoln? Here's something kind of cool too. Can you see this? That says the Party of Lincoln. Pretty neat, huh? These are what we call campaign buttons. And the very first one in the middle was Abraham Lincoln's campaign button because he started something that's called the Republican Party in the United States. But that you get to learn about in 5th grade and 8th grade. So today I'm going to give you some fun facts about him. So let me share my screen with you so that you can see some pictures, make it a little more fun, and then I will read you a fun Abraham Lincoln book. So here's our PowerPoint. You know how we like to look at pictures when we talk. So I'm going to show you pictures just like we would if we were together. So there he is. There's the man of the hour that we're talking about, Abraham Lincoln. So what can I tell you that you might not have known about him? I bet that you did not know that Abraham Lincoln right there was the very first president to ever have a beard. People didn't have beards at the founding of our country. Well, let me rephrase that. People did have beards, but those were the people that were thought of as not being as educated. Maybe they were fur trappers. Maybe they were out in the wilderness. And so politicians, presidents were always clean shaven. So Abraham Lincoln, first guy ever to be president and have a beard. He was the tallest president. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall, which is huge. How many of you guys have dads that are over 6 feet tall? He was 4 more inches taller than that. He was the first president that we had that was born outside of the 13 colonies. And those are some interesting facts about him that you might not have known. So let's see what else we can learn about him. He was the 16th president, and he was president in a period of our country called the Civil War. And you can see on this screen, you have two guys who look like they're fighting against each other. It was the Union and the Confederacy. And Abraham Lincoln was the president of the Union at that time. So he was president in a period of our history that has never happened before or since his presidency, where the people in our own country were fighting each other. You probably have heard about that. That was over the issue of slavery. And Abraham Lincoln was someone who was not in favor of slavery. He knew it was wrong. But he is best known because he saved the Union. He saved our country and he stopped slavery. So Abraham Lincoln, very famous for that because that was really, really important. He's also known for giving this very famous speech. And if I take you over to I'm taking you around my office again, to my bookshelf, I have his famous speech right there. Can you see that? I have it in a whole book just of this speech. It's called the Gettysburg Address. And this is a painting of him giving the Gettysburg Address. It's very famous in the history of our country because he says that the government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from this earth. He's saying the United States, we're going to stay and we're going to stay strong. And so that was kind of a huge deal when he said that. Big enough deal that I have a little leather book of it on my bookshelf over there. Abraham Lincoln, he was born in this state right here. This state's called Kentucky, and it was the first president born in a state that wasn't on the coast in one of our 13 colonies. So that's where he was born. He was born in a little log cabin in this place of Kentucky. His family was pretty poor. They were considered to be very, very poor. He had one brother and one sister, and his brother died when his brother was just still a child. And they grew up inside this one-room cabin. So the whole family was in one room. They didn't have a separate room for the kitchen and a separate room for their bedrooms. It was just one tiny little cabin. In Kentucky, slavery was legal, but Abraham Lincoln's father was a religious Baptist who refused to own slaves. He thought that that was wrong and that all people were created equal. So his father shared the same beliefs as Abraham did when he grew up. Pretty soon the family moved from Kentucky to this state called Illinois. They went to Indiana first and then they ended up in Illinois. When he was about 22 years old, I think, is when he ended up there. And he did all kinds of things when he was there. He served as a lawyer. He got involved in politics. He obviously learned to read and write, went to school, but not for a very long time. In this point in our history, students didn't have to go to school the way that they do today. They would learn to read and write and then would teach themselves, almost the way you guys are homeschooled, where you study what you're interested in, and that's what Abraham Lincoln did. And so he became a really, really good lawyer. He had a nickname. Anybody know what his nickname was? You probably have heard this. His nickname was Honest Abe. And he was called Honest Abe because he ran for miles one time to give a customer the correct change. He had worked in a store, and when someone came in and bought something for him, they got the wrong change. And instead of just going, oh, we'll keep that extra money, he didn't do that. He followed them and went all the way back to find the customer and give them their money. This is that Illinois' welcome to sign. Whenever you travel into states, I don't know if you guys knew this, there's always a special sign that says, welcome to our state. This state in Illinois says the land of Lincoln because they're really proud that Lincoln was from there. If you come into California, what do you think it says coming into California? It says, welcome to the Golden State, because remember, this is where gold was found, was in California. Abraham Lincoln, he got married. He married a lady named Mary Todd. And when we read about his life, because you saw my books on my bookshelf, we know that he really, really loved his wife and his family. He had, 4 kids, but sadly, only one of them lived to be an adult. All of the children died when they were young. One of the things that I think is really interesting about Abraham Lincoln is this hat. This is an actual photograph of Abraham Lincoln. Did you know he was the first president to have his picture taken when he was inaugurated? Inaugurated means when he became the president of the United States. He was the first one to have a photograph taken. In fact, the Civil War, when he was president, was the first war that had photographs taken. This is because that's when the camera was invented, was when around when Abraham Lincoln became president. But oftentimes, when you think of Abraham Lincoln, you picture him with this big hat. And yes, he often wore this top hat. And one of the things that he would do, are you ready for this? He would put in his top hat his important papers. It was kind of like his own little personal file cabinet that he carried around everywhere with him, which I think is kind of funny. Let's see, what else did Abraham Lincoln do that you may not know about? He worked as a postmaster. He worked as a shopkeeper. And you know what, Abraham Lincoln, we think of him as being so famous and so successful, and he was president of the United States, but he's also a person who failed a lot. When I say failed, I mean he tried stuff and he didn't do well at it to begin with. That's why we say it's so important to keep trying. So when you try something and you can't do it, like Devin, if you're watching this, I'm thinking about you because Devin, when we first started class, we were cutting out something and you said, "Oh, Mrs. Chiappe, I can't do that." And I said, "You got to keep trying, Devin." And we got you smaller papers and you practiced and you practiced. And Devin, I've only known you for 7 weeks now, but your cutting is so much better than when we started because Devin kept practicing, he kept trying. And that's what Abraham Lincoln did. He tried to become a politician. He ran for an office in his state and he didn't win. And he ran for Senate in the Congress of the United States and he didn't win. And so he never gave up. Just like Devin kept cutting, Abraham Lincoln kept trying. And so it's so important to be like Abraham Lincoln and keep trying. So there's just a couple of little fun facts, some little tidbits, some little interesting information about Abraham Lincoln. And I also have for you, you guys ready for this? Voila! A picture book about Abraham Lincoln. So if we were together in class, I would do these things. I would show you some pictures. We would listen to a song. Oh, and our song, I put the link there. So I hope you listen to that. It's the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It's a song that was very famous and played a lot during the Civil War when Abraham Lincoln was president. So that's our song, the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which you can listen to. I will also have another little video about Abraham Lincoln you can look at. I'd like you to, if you can, practice your Pledge of Allegiance. Do you remember how we've been saying the Pledge of Allegiance? So I would love for you to do that too. But meanwhile, let me read you a book about Abraham Lincoln. Now, I didn't do so good last time. We'll see if I can do a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to get comfortable here in my office so that you can see the book and we can read about it. Okay. So there we go. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1819, in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky. Remember we saw a picture of it a minute ago, his log cabin? Abraham and his older sister Sarah helped in the house and on the farm. When they were not needed at home, they walked 2 miles to school and 2 miles back. When Abraham was 7 years old, his family moved west to Indiana. Abraham helped his father chopped down trees. They cleared the land for their farm and built a new log cabin. When Abraham was 9, his mother died. A year later, his father married Sarah Bush Johnston, a widow with 3 children. Abraham's new stepmother was good to Abraham. He called her my angel mother. Abraham loved books. Sometimes he walked many miles to borrow one. When he plowed the fields, he often stopped to read. In 1830, when Abraham was 21, his family moved to Illinois. Abraham helped his father plant corn and build a fence and a new house. Can you see him reading there? I like to read too. That's why you can see all the books in my office. Abraham was tall and thin. He was also very strong. In 1831, he and 2 other men built a flatboat. They floated down the Mississippi River to New Orleans. See him on his boat there? In New Orleans, Abraham saw a slave market for the first time. Black slaves in chains were being sold like cattle. Seeing that done to people made Abraham miserable. He never forgot what he saw. Abraham took a steamboat up the river to New Salem, Illinois, where he worked as a clerk in the general store. He was 22 years old. Abraham laughed, told jokes and stories, and loved to talk about politics. People liked him. Can you see him there with his friends? In 1834, Abraham Lincoln began to study law. 2 years later, he became a lawyer and moved to Springfield, the new capital of Illinois. Abraham ran for political office many times. He served in the Illinois legislature for 2 years and was also a member of the United States House of Representatives. He doesn't have a beard yet. In Springfield, Abraham fell in love with Mary Todd. She was lively and smart, and they were married in 1842. They had 4 sons, Robert, Edward, William, and Thomas. In 1858, Abraham was chosen by the new Republican Party to run for the United States Senate. He ran against Senator Stephen Douglas. Abraham Lincoln spoke out against slavery. He and Senator Douglas had many debates. Lincoln lost the election, but the debates made him famous throughout the country. A debate is when 2 people discuss a topic that they disagree on, and they explain why one thinks one way and the other person thinks the other way. They were debating the topic of slavery. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln ran against Senator Stephen Douglas for President of the United States. This time, Abraham was elected. When Abraham Lincoln became president, there were more than 3 million Black slaves in the southern states. Voters in the South were not happy to have a president who hated slavery. Soon after Abraham Lincoln was elected president, 11 southern states withdrew from the United States. They formed their own government, the Confederate States of America. You guys see that cotton there? Cotton, we've been talking about in my other class, was important to the economy, the way people made money in the South. On April 12, 1863, Confederate soldiers fired on Fort Sumter, a United States fort in South Carolina. The war between the North and the South, the Civil War, began. Abraham Lincoln led the war to keep the country united. You see, there we have the Civil War starting. During the war, Lincoln wrote the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that all slaves in the Confederate States were free. In 1863, Lincoln spoke at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. His speech became known as the Gettysburg Address. He said, "Our government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." That's that speech I was telling you about that I have in my bookshelf. In 1864, the North won some important battles. Later that year, Abraham Lincoln was re-elected president. On April 9th, 1865, the war ended. The South surrendered to the North. The war lasted 4 years and many people had died. 5 days later, on April 14th, Abraham and Mary Lincoln were at a theater. 1 hour after the play began, there was a shot. John Wilkes Booth, an actor who favored the South, had shot the president. Lincoln died the next day. A train carried Abraham Lincoln's body to Springfield, Illinois. Millions of people came to watch the train pass by and say goodbye to Abraham Lincoln. People called him Honest Abe, Father Abraham, and Savior of the Union. Some say Abraham Lincoln was our greatest president. And some important dates. So there you guys go. I hope you liked the book, Abraham Lincoln. I hope you learned something new about him. And below, I have some worksheets for you and our Abraham Lincoln project. Do you remember when we made George Washington? We were going to make the same kind of thing. It's called paper piecing for Abraham Lincoln. So if you guys do that at home, send a picture to me. I'd love to see it. And I will see you next week when we continue our America the Beautiful class doing this remote learning. Have a great week, you guys. I miss you. I hope everybody's doing well and staying healthy and safe. And I will, or you will at least see me next week. Bye, guys.